My best friend is a top-tier alpha, but he has a problem. He suffers from pheromone overload, and if he doesn't release the excess pheromones, it can be life-threatening. As a beta, I volunteered to be his pheromone container. Since I'm a beta, the pheromones don't stay on me for more than a couple of days anyway. But over time, my best friend started biting my neck every now and then. Wait, has his condition gotten that serious? If he bites anyone else again, people might start to suspect something about us. 1. My name is Arthur, and I'm a beta. I have a brother named Brandon, who is a top-tier alpha. But he has a condition, pheromone overload. If he doesn't release the extra pheromones, it could be life-threatening for him. So ever since he hit maturity at 18, he locks himself in a room once a month to release the excess pheromones. After he comes out, he always complains to me about how hard it is to endure alone in there. Later, I asked the doctor and found out there's an easier way to solve this problem. Brandon can mark someone else to release the excess pheromones. The method existed, but Brandon is an alpha, he couldn't just go around biting any random omega, that would be irresponsible. Then I had a brilliant idea, why not have Brandon bite me? Since I'm a beta, his pheromones won't last long on me. It wouldn't harm me and would help Brandon. Perfect. I'm really smart. I told Brandon my plan, and he agreed without hesitation. Since then, Brandon and I have kept a weekly appointment for his treatment. 2. Today's Friday, the first weekend I promised to help Brandon with his treatment. Having Brandon mark me once a week helps him release some pheromones regularly, so by the end of the month, he won't suffer so much. Right now, I'm sitting in Brandon's rented apartment outside of school, waiting for him to mark me so he can release more pheromones. This apartment is rented by Brandon's parents mainly for him to spend time alone each month releasing pheromones. I haven't been here much. Although Brandon and I have been childhood friends, we're adults now. If Brandon brings someone to stay here, it could be awkward if I'm around. But recently, I've had to spend weekends here with Brandon. It's because when a beta gets marked by an alpha, the beta carries some of the alpha's pheromones. Even though the pheromones fade quickly on a beta, someone with a sensitive nose could still detect them. Brandon and I only have a pure, treatment-based relationship. If anyone found out I carried another alpha's pheromones, it might mess up my chances with someone I'm interested in. To avoid this, we decided that after Brandon marks me Friday night, I'll stay here for 2 more days. That way, by Monday when I return to school, the pheromones will have mostly faded. Everything's planned out perfectly. 3. Brandon, hurry up. It's Friday today. If you transfer your pheromones to me now, I'll have 2 full days to burn them off. I sat on the sofa, speaking to Brandon beside me, then turned boldly to put my neck right in front of him. I turned too quickly to see the dark flicker in his eyes. After waiting for a while with no move from him, I was about to turn around and urge him again, but he grabbed my arms and pulled me close from behind. He rested his forehead against my shoulder and whispered, "It might feel a little uncomfortable." I could feel his chest rise and fall as he spoke. My gut told me this wasn't going to be good. I struggled to free myself and said, "Man up. How bad can it be? Bite me already. If you wait much longer, it'll be dark." Brandon's expression suddenly darkened. Then he twisted me around again, this time wrapping his arms around me and biting my neck. The sensation of pheromones being injected wasn't pleasant, like a cool liquid flowing through my veins. As a beta, I usually can't smell alpha or omega pheromones. But when Brandon injected his pheromones into me, I actually caught a faint scent. Brandon's pheromones smell like roses. A very light, pleasant rose scent. He had told me before his pheromones smelled like roses. But I'd never been able to smell it. Because I'm a beta, one who can't smell alpha or omega pheromones. Back then, I secretly wished I'd mature into an omega so I could smell Brandon's pheromones. But ABO genders usually mature by 18. I hadn't matured at 18, 19, or even 20. Now at 21, I accepted I'm a beta. After that, Brandon stopped mentioning the scent of his pheromones. In a daze, I thought, it's pretty nice that alphas and omegas come with their own natural scent, saves money on perfume. 4. Arthur, what are you thinking about? Nothing, just thinking about what to eat for lunch. Right now, I'm walking to the cafeteria with my roommate. That Friday, after Brandon marked me, I fainted. I never heard of an alpha marking a beta and the beta passing out. Could it be that Brandon's pheromones were too overwhelming, and I just couldn't handle it as a beta? Later, I slowly woke up and saw Brandon's anxious face. I was about to say I was fine, but the sharp pain in my neck distracted me. I reached up and touched the bite mark on my neck. It was still fresh and warm, a clear set of teeth marks. I cursed out loud, "Brandon, what the hell? Why did you bite so hard?" Brandon seemed relieved I could still talk, and he ignored my joke. Okay, my little lord. I promise next time I'll be gentler. How are you feeling now? Instead of teasing me back, Brandon seriously asked about my condition. I suddenly felt a bit embarrassed. I'm okay, can bear it. Arthur, if you feel anything wrong, tell me immediately. I'll take you to the hospital. Brandon looked at me seriously. I quickly said, really, I'm fine. Just cook me something nice these 2 days and take care of me. Brandon seemed a little helpless, then sighed and said, got it. You just sit tight here. Then he turned and walked to the kitchen. True to his word, those 2 days he spoiled me rotten at his place. I was definitely the boss there. 5. I reached up and touched my neck, it was smooth now. I thought the bite mark was healing fast. Suddenly, my roommate eating with me pointed at me and said, Arthur, something's up with you. Question mark. Don't play dumb. You were just holding your neck and grinning to yourself. Come on, tell me, do you have a crush? Say it, and I'll help set you up. Carl is the biggest gossip in our dorm, and loves playing matchmaker. Alpha, beta, or omega, he always finds their contact info and manages to pair them up. He's arranged quite a few couples but is still single himself. I snapped out of it and answered, nothing like that. Don't worry about me. Come on, tell me. I stayed quiet, so Carl kept pestering me about it in the end. After all, no matter what, Brandon and I just aren't possible. 6. Brandon matured into an alpha at 18, which was fine in itself. But after his maturity, he was diagnosed as an extremely rare top-tier alpha with pheromone overload. Pheromone overload means having too many pheromones inside. If they're not released timely, it could cause mental issues for the alpha and even threaten his life. After the diagnosis, the doctor advised Brandon to find an omega partner. An omega could soothe Brandon's mental state with pheromones regularly, and during heat or marking sessions, help ease the overload symptoms. In the ABO world, alpha and omega pairs are considered ideal. As a beta, I had no chance in this game. I'm a little younger than Brandon. When I learned he should find an omega partner, I secretly hoped I would become an omega too. After all, Brandon and I were born to families with alpha-omega pairings, where the chance of maturing into an alpha or omega is higher. At first, I was confident I'd become an omega. 7. That year, Brandon was still weak after maturing. Since he was a top-tier alpha, he had to undergo many tests and was hospitalized. When I visited him, I said frankly, Brandon, don't worry. In a few months, I'll mature. If I become an omega, you won't have to worry anymore. You can mark me then. Brandon smiled happily, all right, Arthur, you better not back out. Also, my pheromones smell like roses, you'll be able to smell it once you mature. I waved him off and said, no way. And Brandon, your pheromone scent is really unique. But in reality, I showed no signs of maturing, I'm still a beta now. At first, my family and Brandon comforted me, saying it might just be delayed maturity. I also went to the hospital for tests, but the doctors said there were no signs of maturity and my hormone levels were normal. In other words, I'm probably just a beta. Because of this, the promise I made Brandon to help him once I matured into an omega was left hanging. He never brought up his pheromone scent again. Eventually, we silently forgot about that promise. 8. It would have been fine if Brandon was a normal alpha and I, a beta, chased him. Maybe we could have ended up together. But Brandon is a top-tier alpha with pheromone overload. He's destined to find an omega partner. If I got close, it might risk his life. Because of that, I decided to just stay by Brandon's side as a friend. Later, maybe Brandon noticed my feelings. He started casually complaining to me how unbearable it was to release pheromones every month. I'm not an alpha, I can't understand his struggles. But he complained often, more than once or twice. That's when I looked for ways to help him. That's how I came up with the idea of letting him mark me to release his excess pheromones. But after Brandon marked me last weekend, I fainted. I don't know what will happen next. I'll just take it one step at a time. 9. Time flies, and this Friday is already the last time this month I'll help Brandon with his treatment. Right now, I'm slumped on the sofa in Brandon's living room, too tired from classes. I turned to Brandon and said, "Brandon, this is the last time this month I'll let you mark me. Next weekend, when you're alone releasing pheromones, see if you feel better and check if our method really works." Brandon looked up at me and smiled. "I know. I believe it'll work. Arthur, you better be ready to stick with me for the long haul." I waved my hand and replied, "Of course, what are brothers for?" Brandon gave me a deep, slightly helpless look and said, emphasizing the word, "Got it, brother." "Why the attitude? Helping you with your treatment and you're still complaining?" "No, I'm happier than you think." I had no choice but to hurry him on. All right, just mark me already." Fortunately, during this time, I didn't faint when Brandon marked me anymore. More importantly, no one suspected our secret arrangement. Next week is Brandon's monthly pheromone release day. I wonder if marking me really helps with his overload. 10. Arthur, what's going on with you? You've been spacing out. The professor just asked you a question. If I hadn't reminded you, you'd still be daydreaming. Carl put his arm around my shoulder and asked. Nothing much. I was just thinking if Brandon would feel better releasing his pheromones alone this weekend. I care more about the outcome than Brandon himself. Carl, do you think alphas can only pair with omegas? Why do you ask? Got your eye on an alpha girl? Before I could answer, Carl kept teasing, and you've been missing every weekend, probably with your little alpha girlfriend, right? No way. I'm serious. All right. Alpha and omega pairings have been the rule in our ABO society for centuries. Most couples I've matched are either AO or BB pairs. There are some alpha-beta or beta-omega couples, but they rarely last. The pheromone issues usually lead to divorce. Arthur, as betas, it's best we stick with other betas. Carl said this earnestly, then patted my shoulder. You're right. I get it. I just needed someone to remind me. I muttered the last part so quietly it was barely audible. 11. Ding ding ding. My phone vibrated, message from Brandon. Brandon, Arthur, this time releasing pheromones feels much better than before. Really? I replied. Brandon, yeah, I'll still need your help with treatment. No problem. I'd been holding back my urge to ask Brandon how he was doing these past days. When I got his message, all my worries vanished. If my method helps Brandon, that's all I could ask for. After asking Carl, I thought carefully and realized the main obstacle between us is that he's an alpha and I'm a beta. And regardless of whether Brandon finds his destined omega in the future, only an omega can ease his pheromone overload. That alone proves we can't be more than friends. Thinking it through, I still feel being friends is the best fit for us. I can't take it further, but I don't want to back away either. It's a bit bittersweet, but that's what liking someone feels like. Since I like him, I guess I have to accept this pain. 12. So, from early autumn until this hot summer, I've been intermittently marked by Brandon for over half a year. When I go home for holidays, we agree not to mark each other, to avoid suspicion. I don't want a third person to find out about our arrangement. I don't really feel much from Brandon's marks over these months. But recently, Brandon has gotten clingier, almost like we're a couple living together. Mainly because we're both in our final semester with fewer classes. Brandon used that as an excuse to ask if he could mark me more often within a week, saying that would make releasing pheromones easier next time. Once, right after he marked me, I got a last-minute notice for extra classes. I dared only to sit in the back row and left quickly after class. Luckily, the person sitting next to me was a beta who couldn't smell pheromones, or I'd be totally exposed. Another time, Brandon took me to a nearby city to hang out. I thought he wouldn't mark me then. Unexpectedly, Brandon said, "Arthur, what's the big deal? No one there knows us. What are you afraid of? Besides, if I wait to mark you later, you won't have enough time to burn off the pheromones." I thought it made sense and agreed. Later, we ran into two girls who asked us to take a photo for them. Afterwards, they asked with sparkling eyes, "Are you two a couple traveling together?" I was about to deny it, but Brandon said confidently, "Yes." I stared at him wide-eyed. "What are you saying?" After hearing that, the two girls laughed and walked off. I was still shocked when Brandon saw me frozen and explained, admitting we're a couple avoids a lot of trouble. I studied his face and realized he was very sincere. Finally, I sighed, "Fine, you say whatever you want." Then I looked down, avoiding his gaze. I have to admit, when Brandon blurted out we were a couple, it actually felt pretty good. 13. Since Brandon and I came back from our trip, I've felt like he's been teasing me on purpose. Mainly because summer break was coming up, and last week when I was at Brandon's place, I told him we'd have to pause the treatment plan for a while. At that time, I was still sitting on the sofa at Brandon's house. "Brandon, vacation starts next week, so once I'm home, you can't mark me anymore. You'll have to hold back for these 2 months." When Brandon heard that, he suddenly scooted closer to sit next to me, wrapped his arms around me, and whispered near my neck, "But not marking you for 2 months will make me feel bad for a long time." I felt a little guilty but replied, "It probably won't be that bad." Brandon rested his chin on my shoulder and mumbled, "It will." That kind of made him seem like he was acting cute. I laughed at the thought and immediately softened. I started thinking about whether it would be possible to mark him during the holidays after all. Before I could figure it out, Brandon suddenly said, "Arthur, you smell nice." Then he turned his head, brought his nose to the side of my neck, and took a deep breath. After thinking for a moment, he said, "It seems like my scent, but it's very faint. By rights, the pheromones I injected into you should have worn off today, so why is there still a smell?" I gently pulled away from his embrace, sniffed, and asked suspiciously, "No, I don't smell anything." "You must be mistaken." Brandon didn't believe me and tried to lean in for another sniff, but I quickly pushed him away. "It's nothing. I'm a beta, such a faint scent will probably be gone soon." Only then did Brandon stop trying to get closer. 14. Even though Brandon talked about marking me during the holidays, once we actually got home, he stuck to our agreement. From the start, when I offered to help him with treatment, I set one rule: absolutely no one else could know I, a beta, was helping him by being marked. After all, Brandon will eventually find an Omega partner. If everyone found out I'd been marked by him, how would I face his future partner? It's best if only Brandon and I know about this. Otherwise, things would get awkward. Although Brandon and I seem closer lately, I know nothing can happen between us. I thought our doctor-patient relationship could last a long time, at least until we graduated. But something happened during the holiday that led to a break in our relationship. 15. It all started when I casually learned Brandon's pheromone overload hadn't actually improved. I was eating at home when my mom said, "Son, don't you and Brandon go to the same school? You know about Brandon's illness, right? I'm worried he's just pretending to be okay. I wanted to ask you how he's doing at school. Brandon's situation?" I knew it all too well. Clearing my throat, I said, "Actually, I heard from Brandon that his overload has gotten much better." My mom frowned and said, "I don't think so. I heard his condition hasn't improved. A few days ago at the hospital, the doctor said it actually got worse." I anxiously replied, "No way, that's what Brandon told me himself. Maybe he doesn't want you to worry. After all, only marking an omega can ease that illness. That's how it is for top-tier alphas. I didn't catch much after that. Only one thought stayed with me: Brandon's method of marking me to relieve his overload wasn't working. If it wasn't working, why would Brandon lie to me? My face must have looked terrible because my mom quietly asked, "Son, what are you thinking? You're worried about Brandon, aren't you?" I forced a smile. Yeah, I didn't expect Brandon's condition to be so serious. Then I kept eating in silence. 16. I really wanted to ask Brandon directly, but I knew he's always secretive. If I asked him straight up, he definitely wouldn't tell me the truth. So I chose to ask the doctor instead. Later, I learned that while an alpha can release pheromones by marking a beta, that's only true for normal alphas. Because betas don't have glands, a normal alpha marking a beta releases about 30% of their pheromones, but a top-tier alpha marking a beta only releases about 5%. For a top-tier alpha like Brandon, this small release means he needs to mark more often. No wonder Brandon often couldn't help but mark me multiple times. If the marking target were an omega, he wouldn't need to do this so often or suffer these side effects. In short, it's because I'm not an omega. I blame myself for not asking the doctor carefully before rushing to tell Brandon I wanted to help with his treatment, only to make things harder for him. After learning this, I went to find Brandon. 17. Brandon, I know now that your method of marking me to relieve your pheromone overload doesn't work, I said calmly, looking straight at him across from me. Brandon smiled and replied, Arthur, what are you talking about? I told you it works. Don't lie to me. I know you went to the hospital a few days ago, and the results showed your overload hasn't improved. To make sure, I even asked the doctor. That's when I found out that for top-tier alphas, marking a beta barely releases any pheromones at all. Brandon was silent for a moment, then said, Okay, I admit marking you doesn't help with my pheromone overload. Hearing him admit it suddenly made me feel like I'd been wasting my efforts. I looked at him and said, In that case, Brandon, our agreement about me helping you treat your illness is off. Brandon looked anxious and hurriedly said, Arthur, don't say that. I found an agency that claims they can help top-tier alphas release excess pheromones by marking regular betas. Enough, Brandon. Don't be ridiculous. There's no way such an agency is legal. Don't go there. Ridiculous? If I hadn't been coming to you every month, complaining about how hard it is to release pheromones alone, would you even think of helping me? When I differentiated into an alpha and you were still a beta, you promised you'd stay by my side. But you slowly drifted away. Do you think I didn't notice? What do you want from me? For me to ignore the danger and stay with you? Normal alpha-beta pairs don't always last, let alone with a top-tier alpha like you, who's more controlled by pheromones. You're always like this, never considering how I feel, just making decisions on your own. Brandon then said, Arthur, just trust me this once, I'm also. Realizing what he might say, I quickly interrupted loudly, Enough, Brandon. Don't go to any shady agencies. Just listen to me. Find yourself an omega girlfriend or boyfriend, okay? Brandon seemed amused and a bit angry, his voice cold as he said, Fine, Arthur. That's what you said. Then he turned and left. And just like that, Brandon and I cut off contact. 18. I was worried Brandon might really go to one of those agencies, so I indirectly asked my mom to check on Brandon through his mom. But apparently, Brandon seemed fine, though who knows if that was true. My mom leaned in and sniffed, saying, Arthur, why are you asking about Brandon through me? Don't you two see each other often? No, I haven't seen him in days. That's nonsense. Then how do you explain the alpha pheromones on your body if you're a beta? My heart skipped a beat, almost thinking our secret was out. I could only laugh nervously, maybe I accidentally got some on me. Strangely, everyone kept saying I smelled like an alpha. But after the holiday, I hadn't let Brandon mark me at all. My mom was muttering about whether Brandon and I had a fight. Afraid she'd keep asking, I quickly said I was tired and went to my room. I wasn't lying about being tired. Since our argument, I'd been unusually sleepy and weak, maybe from emotional exhaustion. I thought it was a small thing, but then I suddenly fainted at home. That's when I learned an earth-shattering truth. 19. Mr. Arthur, your test results show preliminary signs of differentiating into an omega, the doctor said softly. I anxiously replied, but I'd been tested many times before, and all showed I'm a beta. How could I suddenly show omega traits? The doctor glanced back and said, previous results were probably accurate. It's possible you were catalyzed by pheromones from a top-tier alpha, leading to a secondary differentiation. But top-tier alphas release very little pheromones when marking betas, right? The doctor looked back again and answered, yes, that's true. But your parents come from an AO pairing, correct? I looked at my parents and nodded, yes. In AO families, it's common to have alphas and omegas, but some children don't differentiate and become betas. Among those betas, if they encounter an alpha whose pheromones match closely and are repeatedly marked, they have a chance of secondary differentiation into an omega. I was stunned and whispered, that really happens? The doctor smiled softly and said, it's rare but true. Also, about 80% of your current pheromones likely come from the alpha who induced your differentiation. Before I could react, the doctor dropped a bombshell. Because your differentiation is late and unusual, it's best you have the alpha who frequently marks you assist in your transition to omega. The more the doctor said, the lower my head sank. This was it, I couldn't hide it anymore. I felt like my parents were already onto me. I had just told Brandon to find another omega, and now I was about to become an omega myself. God really played a cruel joke on me. 20. Arthur, you better tell me honestly, who is that alpha? My mom stood in front of me with her arms crossed, her expression anything but kind. My dad was beside her, trying to calm her down by holding her. I looked at both of them and slowly said, that alpha is Brandon. Mom grabbed my ear and said, I was just guessing if that alpha was Brandon, and it really is. Arthur, you're something else. How did you let Brandon mark you? I grabbed her hand and groaned, Mom, it hurts. There are still so many people around. Come on, honey, Arthur must have his reasons. Dad stepped in and talked gently until he managed to get me out of Mom's grip. I told my parents everything about how I was helping Brandon with his illness. Arthur, you think just because you're a beta you're safe against a top-tier alpha? Tell me, how far have you two gone? I swear it was just biting his neck. In the end, Mom decided to call Brandon over to help with my differentiation. Life really is dramatic. Just a few days ago, I argued with Brandon and told him to find another omega. And now, I had to ask Brandon to assist me in becoming an omega. 21. After the decision was made, I stayed overnight in the hospital. The next day I saw Brandon. He seemed unchanged but didn't say a word when he came in. I lay on the hospital bed staring at him. The scene was undeniably awkward. Trying to break the silence, I said, Brandon, you didn't go to that agency, did you? That made things even more awkward. Brandon glanced at me and said, no, I didn't. I listened to someone's advice and found an omega who matches what I want. I felt a little disappointed but forced a smile. That's fast. Congratulations. I heard Brandon's resigned voice, Arthur, you're really slow to catch on. What? He stood up, took my hand, and said, the omega I want hasn't differentiated yet. Does that make sense to you now? I looked up at Brandon, seeing the teasing smile all over his face. I held back my excitement, my tail wagging like crazy inside, and said, I think I get it a little. Brandon's voice turned serious, Arthur, if you really become an omega this time, does your earlier offer to let me mark you still stand? I didn't answer but felt my face slowly redden. Come on, if it didn't stand, I wouldn't have let you mark me back when I was still a beta. 22. After clearing the air, Brandon and I returned to how things were before. Brandon seriously said to me, Arthur, I know you're being forced to differentiate into an omega because of me, but don't worry, I'll take responsibility. I also have something to say. Before I finished, I remembered how Brandon used to act pitiful every month to get my sympathy, so I switched tone, yeah, it's your fault. You better take good care of it. Brandon didn't react much but suddenly stood up and hugged me. I asked, so why did you come today? The doctor said before you finish differentiating, my pheromones need to assist. My main task now is to release pheromones for you, though you can't smell them yet. I whispered, that's fine, I'll smell them soon enough. In that intimate moment, I suddenly remembered something and laughed. I asked Brandon, I just remembered something. He kindly asked, what's got you so happy? I looked into his eyes with a grin. Back in 2nd grade, one day I didn't want to go to school. You hid my Ultraman toy and said I could play with it if I went. But once at school, you didn't let me play with it. After morning exercises, when we lined up, I was right in front of you, begging for the toy. Brandon, where's my Ultraman? Didn't you say I could play with it at school? The school doesn't allow toys. You can't play. And class isn't dismissed yet, hurry back. I don't want to. I want my toy. No toy. Arthur, Brandon, come out here. That's when I hugged you, trying to see if you were hiding the toy behind your back. Then the teacher pulled us out and told us to keep that pose. Not much different from now, huh? I laughed and leaned on Brandon's shoulder. Brandon laughed helplessly too. I guess that was the first time the perfect student Brandon got scolded by the teacher like that. Still laughing, I said, well, it's not my fault, you took my favorite toy. Brandon hugged me again, smiling, yeah, all my fault. So, with Brandon's company, I began preparing for my differentiation that was 4 years late. Thankfully, my condition stayed stable. I smoothly differentiated into an Omega, and Brandon stayed by my side the whole time.